Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of cryptids horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. My little brother thinks mommy is a ghoul. Mommy is a ghoul. I am telling the truth. We were outside playing in a local park when my little brother warned me for the umpteenth time. I have a sharp memory, and I saw her kill Daddy and Rose with my own eyes. Ghoul kills and takes the body of the victim. Please stay away from her. Don't be silly, Ash. I rolled my eyes. Thieves killed Daddy and Rose. Didn't the police investigate the crime? You need to stop reading those horror comics. They are filling your head with wild ideas. 5 years ago, thieves broke into our house. Dad found them sneaking into our home and intercepted them. In the encounter that followed, thieves killed Dad and Rose, my elder sister, who tried to help him. Mom alerted the 911, and they dispatched a crew for our help. But those bastards fled before the police could arrive. That horrific event still shakes us to this day. The story had made big news in our locality then, and the police had nabbed the criminals only in a few days. The jury found them guilty of murder, and the court sentenced them to a lifetime in jail. Although the rightful justice eased our pain, we are still unable to come to terms with their loss. Their murders have had a massive impact on Mary, the mental well-being of our mother. She blames herself for the tragedy somehow, and grief has made her a shell of her former self. Nowadays, she seldom, if ever, talks or smiles to anyone. Listen, Ash, I know you love and miss Daddy, but Daddy and Rose are gone. Your behavior is wrong. Please don't bring this up again. Mommy will be sad if she hears you. I looked at my only brother and sighed. But I really saw Mommy that day. Ash chewed on his bottom lips and fiddled with his fingers. Enough talking. Let's go back home. I am starving. I tickled Ash, who giggled in a girlish voice. We raced betting who can reach home first, laughing and kicking stones in our path. Dinner was usual rice and some bland green vegetables. We finished the dinner in silence and helped Mom with the dishes, who seemed lost in her own world. She didn't utter a single word the entire time. I hate to see Mom like this. I bit my lips and hugged Mom, wrapping my arms over her body. Mom, we're off to sleep. Good night. Her parched lips lifted to form a rare smile on her pale face, and she nodded toward me. I felt a hand sneak from behind me and pinch my arms like a mosquito bite. My face twitched from the stinging pain as Ash dug his nails on my flesh and dragged me by the elbow. I shook my head and smiled back at Mom and went up with Ash to our room. Time was 3 a.m. in the night. Ash and I were drifting in our sleep when a glimpse of dark shadow jolted me awake. Oh, it's Mary. I saw a monstrous figure stand in the corner. Her body concealed in the darkness, save for the red beady eyes flickering like fireflies. Are you scared, Forrest? A dull guttural sound loomed from the shadow's throat. Her long crimson tongue flicked between her razor-sharp teeth as she opened her mouth. Nope, I am not. Let's send Ash to his daddy. He knows way too much, I grinned. Second story. Goat Man. I was at home with my friend, Samantha, a few hours after school ended, when my dad called me to let me know that he wasn't going to come home that night. There was going to be a really shitty storm, and said he'd rather stay at a friend's house with a few co-workers than drive 2 hours. My dad is a construction worker. He works at different locations for every new project. This one was far. My mom came home not too long after, drenched in rain. She talked to Sam for a bit before telling us she'd be upstairs taking a shower and filling out some paperwork from the office. Shit was thrown into the air at around 8 p.m. when Sam and I heard knocking on the door. It was already weird, because who the fuck is even out in this weather? It was pouring rain, and the streets looked like an actual stream of piss. I went down to the door, dragging Sam with me, only to be greeted by nothing. We were looking out the door for a little under 5 seconds when we heard knocking again. Now, this is when the shit that was thrown into the air reached and hit the fan. Sam and I instantly pissed ourselves when we realized someone was knocking on my back door. My back door being the door leading to the backyard. We quietly went up the stairs to my mom's room, finding her asleep, not even changed out of her work clothes. I woke her up immediately and told her someone was in our backyard. This obviously caused alarm, and seeing her so freaked out freaked Sam and I out even more. This might not sound as scary to you, but being home without my dad in the house was scary enough on its own. Mom went down into the kitchen, with us trailing not even 2 feet behind her, and she pulled out her rolling pin. Before we could reach the door, the knocking stopped. Mom reached over and pulled the curtain back. All Sammy and Mom saw was pitch black, but I swear I saw someone standing a few feet away from the door. Maybe it was because I was the only one of us facing its direction, but it was tall as fuck, like 7 feet and maybe over. That's all I could tell you because that's all I saw of it. It was probably just one of the tree branches. It's really windy out too, Mom suggested. I could tell Sammy wasn't too sure, and I knew damn well it wasn't a tree branch, but why freak the rest of them out? I know now I should have told them so we could have left, but I kept quiet for their sake. About an hour after that, Mom decided to go to the department store down the street to pick up some dinner and left both of us at home. It was only 5 minutes later when we heard knocking again. I quickly felt uneasy. It could be your mom? I went down to the door and asked who it was. The following 5 seconds of silence were the longest 5 seconds of my life. It's me. It was Mom, but at the same time I felt like it wasn't. Looking back now, I realize her voice sounded like it was lacking all human characteristics. It wasn't playful, nor was it frustrated at how long we were keeping her in the rain. It sounded like she didn't even know what emotions were. I opened the door without unlocking the chain and was greeted by my mom. Sam and I let her in, and she came without any bags. She sat down on the couch for a few minutes, looking around. She was so fucked up. She seemed glitchy, like her actions weren't flowing smoothly. Mom, are you okay? You don't seem right. Her eyes looked at me before the rest of her face turned. It was just a long walk. Cold. Outside. Raining. She kept listing words and phrases that made little sense. I was getting more uneasy by the second, but I think Sam was just glad we weren't home alone anymore. The scariest thing that happened that night happened during one of Mom's rambling. Sammy had asked her what we were having for dinner, and she started listing more foods that we didn't even have. Halfway through her rant, I received a text from Mom. Do you girls want lasagna? Ask Sammy what she wants. Take your time deciding. It's so warm in here. My heart instantly dropped. Mom was right in front of me, talking about fish fingers. Sam and whatever was pretending to be Mom directed their attention to me. I was panting and, according to Sam, all color had drained from my face. Who is it? Mom asked. Wrong number. I quickly flashed a smile. You look tired, Mom. Do you want to go to bed? Sam and I will make dinner. I think I just need a bath. We nodded and she stood up and made her way to the stairs. She was at the bottom of the stairs when I pulled out my phone to take a photo. I looked down at it for 1 second to cancel the 20% remaining notification, but when I looked back up, Mom was already at the top step. I can't stress this enough. The time in which I looked at my phone and looked back up was impossible for someone to walk 13 steps. I ran back to Sammy and waited until we both heard the water in the bathroom running. Sam, my mom texted me. What? When that thing was talking to us, my mom texted me. She started freaking out and thinking for reasons. Maybe she meant to send the text earlier, but it only delivered now. It seemed valid. Apple is always glitchy like that. But we decided to call her anyway just to make sure. Just as the phone started ringing, someone knocked on the door. We went to see who it was. Sammy was about to open it, but I put my hand in front of her. I was so terrified at this point that I was in tears. Sammy stared at me in confusion. "Hey, Mom," I said into the phone. I was shaking, and as soon as Sammy heard me say that, she looked like she was about to throw up. "Open the door. It's freezing outside." I sighed in relief and threw door open. Mom was standing there with the phone pressed to her ear and her shopping bags around her feet. We quickly explained what was happening, and it took my mom 2 minutes of hearing the story for her to climb up the stairs and walk towards the bathroom. She literally kicked the door open and found the tub almost filled to the rim. The window was also open and the fly screen was torn. The rest of the night consisted of us trying to get over what happened. We ended up sleeping together in my mom's room, and my dad came home early next morning. I only started researching a few days ago, and I found out it was the Goat Man. I also came across this story which shares similar aspects. Please read the story I linked, because it's a lot more terrifying and has more encounters than I did. Third story. Something or someone was in my bedroom last night. Let me clear one thing up. I'm a man of reason. I never believed in ghouls, goblins, or ghosts. But one night that changed. I don't know how to deal with this, and I hope someone shares my experience. Or rather, visit. It happened on a day like any other day. I was in the office. I have an upstanding position at an insurance firm. I'm the company's working bee. I love my work. I'm the first one to show up and the last one to leave. Crunching numbers from 7 to 1,500 hours. This day was busy, and I left a bit later than usual. It had been a long day, and I was mentally exhausted. I decided to walk home to make up for the time sitting on my ass all day. The walk home takes about 35 minutes. Nothing too strange happened on the road home, other than seeing the shadow of a tall man with a weird shape walking behind me for a short time. I didn't look back and just made a mental note like, strange. Must be wearing a weird hood or something. The shadow looks all wrong and bent. At home, I did my standard routine. Make food, watch TV, read, go to the bathroom, and then off to bed. I fell asleep within seconds as I always do. Some people would call that a superpower. I woke up from a loud crash in the dead of the night. The moonlight was at least passing through my window. I lay still and just listened. Was it my garbage bin on the driveway that fell? I heard the wind howling after all. The house makes cracking noises, but it's not out of the ordinary. It's an old house after all. But then I heard something that made me worried. A creak in the hallway. You know, the way old wooden boards sound when someone walks on them. I thought to myself that if someone is breaking in, I will freely give them whatever they want. I hear another creak, closer to my bedroom. The door slowly opened less than halfway and I see someone in the opening, standing there, watching me, completely still. I froze in place and just hoped he would leave. And he did. The shape of the man disappeared from the half-opened door, and I heard careful creaks going towards the hallway again. Then the creaking turned to fast and heavy thuds, someone running to my bedroom. My door slams open and an extremely tall man just stands there, just inside the bedroom. In pure shock at the situation, I just lay there, silent, watching. He doesn't look at me, just stands there with heavy breaths. I start to recognize him. Well, not entirely, but his shape in the dark feels familiar. It's the hooded man from earlier, I realized. I let out a meager, "What do you want?" And the man starts to pace violently around my bed without saying a word. back and forth. Then I see it. He isn't wearing a hood or a mask. A wide and abnormally large nose, crooked and bent. It covers most of his face. He notices that I notice, and I accidentally look at him straight in his eyes. They are completely black, but not in color, the way someone with pure hate would look at you. The way someone with evil intent would look at you. His pacing becomes faster, and his feet crash on the floor as if it's gonna break. Then he just abruptly stops, which somehow made me even more afraid. He tilts his head slightly up and starts to sniff in the air, and in doing so, widening his nostrils even more. And I saw right into them, right into his brain. There was no skin in between, and it twitched every time he inhaled, smelling me. He started to sniff more violently and moved closer to me. He stopped right beside my bed, beside me, towering over me. I'm sweating like never before, and it feels like my heart is gonna explode and pop out of my chest from sheer terror. He sniffs louder, then looks down at me and smiles. A smile was so terrible it will be forever imprinted in my mind. And then in a blink of an eye, he is gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I laid in the exact same position until the sun came up, and only then dared I leave my bedroom. My front door was still locked, my back door locked. Everything was locked, and nothing was broken. No windows or anything. How the F did he, or it, get in? What did it want? And what was he smelling on me? Why did it smile so sinister at me when I was the most afraid I've ever been in my life? Fourth story. Night of the Wood Nymphs. Alice told me that, like most Tulane students, she woke up that morning thirsty and hungover. So, she dragged herself out of bed and made her way down to the shared kitchen of the large, craftsman-style house in which she was renting a room. Alice poured herself a glass of water from a filtered pitcher in the fridge and reflexively moved to the sink while downing the water in 3 long gulps. As Alice set the empty glass in the sink, her gaze drifted to the window above it. She spotted her roommate Sarah standing at the edge of the small patch of woods bordering the back of their house. She was smiling and waving Alice over, beckoning her to come outside. Sarah was dressed oddly, though. She appeared to have on a short cotton robe and nothing else. Not exactly the ideal clothing for a hike. But to a groggy Alice, Sarah's strange attire barely even registered. Fuck that, was the most coherent thought currently running through her hungover brain. The last thing Alice felt like doing at that moment was going outside. But then her other roommate Lana emerged from the tree-line to stand beside Sarah, and she also started to wave Alice over. Alice replied with an adamant shake of her head, but their gesturing persisted. Even looking at them surrounded by all that morning sunlight was giving her a headache, though. So Alice retrieved her phone from the waistband of her pajama pants and called Sarah. As she heard the line connect, Alice turned back to the window and said, "What?" Sarah sounded confused as she replied, "You called me, crazy lady." Alice, who was still not entirely awake, briefly pulled the phone from her ear to check the time before asking, "Don't you both have class right now?" "Just got out." "Well, you and Lonnie enjoy your frolic. I'm gonna pass." Sarah sounded even more confused as she said, "Lana's not with me. She has another class at 11. Not with you? She's standing a foo dash." Something dawned on Alice just then, as she was glaring at Sarah through the window, her free hand angrily gesturing at Lana directly beside her. Alice lowered her hand and, in a muted tone that was barely audible, she said, "How did you even answer? And why aren't your lips moving? Why aren't my what?" She heard Sarah say this and watched as her doppelganger outside just went on smiling and beckoning Alice to join them. Fear began to set in like an icy finger tracing a line down the center of Alice's back, sending a paralytic shockwave reverberating throughout her body. Alice had made the mistake of locking eyes with the girl who wasn't Sarah, and now she couldn't move and she couldn't look away. The girl who wasn't Lana disappeared back into the treeline, and what was probably only moments later, but felt like an eternity, she re-emerged gripping the arm of a new girl who had her head tilted forward so that her hair hung down in front of her face, obscuring it from view. The girl who wasn't Sarah took hold of the new girl's other arm, and she and the girl who wasn't Lana started guiding her toward the house. Alice was wide awake now, but she could barely hear the real Sarah shouting her name from the phone pressed to her ear. Everything felt like it was happening underwater. As they neared the window, the new girl finally tilted her head back, and the girl on either side of her both reached out a hand to part the hair obscuring her face. Alice knew what she was going to see next even before she saw it, by a simple process of elimination. "You'd think that might make seeing it easier," she lamented to me later. But when they parted the new girl's hair to reveal Alice's own face smiling back at her, let's just say that knowing and seeing are two very different things. Alice was vaguely aware of the fact that she had begun to weep. She could feel the hot tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't lift her hand to wipe them away. The girl who wasn't her was right outside the window now. Her face, Alice's face, was inches from the glass. Her grinning lips suddenly parted, revealing a black void where the inner workings of her mouth should have been. There were no teeth or gums or throat or tongue in there, just a vacant, impossible darkness. Alice told me she could remember staring into this darkness, and then suddenly, it was all she could see. But this is where I come in, so I should probably take a second to explain who I am and what it is I do. My name is Joel, I'm a New Orleans native, and I make a large portion of my living giving French Quarter ghost tours. Not for nothing, but I'm pretty good at it too. It helps that I love the work. How could I not? The hours agree with me. I'm always meeting new people, and I get to drink on the job. If I could, I would spend the rest of my life telling ghost stories to tourists. But of course, that's not all I do. See, when I was first getting my tour guide business off the ground, I needed a way to stand out in what was, and still is, a rather saturated market. So, I decided to advertise myself as a paranormal PI and French Quarter tour guide. I'll spare you the cheesier details, but basically I used to, and still do, stage the tours as if they were cases I had been hired to solve. The gimmick was a big hit, but it had the unintended consequence of occasionally attracting people looking to hire an actual legitimate paranormal detective. Probably not surprising to hear that those are a lot rarer than tour guides. And, as a young upstart business owner, I could only be offered considerable sums of money from desperate people so many times before I finally decided, fuck it. If they want to pay a consultation fee, the least I could do is hear them out. And if you think that means all I did was pocket the fee, listen to their problem, and then quote them some insanely inflated day rate for my actual services, well, yeah, obviously that was the plan. But as it turned out, I had a real knack for the whole paranormal detective thing. Sure, as with any specialized occupation, there was an initial learning curve. It didn't take long for me to get the hang of it, though, and rather quickly I started producing real results. To be completely honest, I had been raised with an advantage that made me uniquely suited to the job. But that, as nerds say, is a story for another time. For our purposes, all you need to know is that I had been working both ends of my advertised occupation going on 12 years the night Alice showed up at my office, which was a tiny space on the first floor of an ancient French Quarter mansion that had been refurbished into storefronts on the bottom and apartments up top. We called the main room of our storefront the lobby to sound classy, and the glorified walk-in closet at the back that was barely wider than the desk which housed it acted as my office proper. That's where Alice was when I finished my last tour of the night and entered the lobby to have my assistant Jeannie greet me with a grin as she said, "Prospective client waiting." Of course, the whole paranormal detective thing also attracted its fair share of crazies. By this point, though, I had an excellent system for filtering them out. And by that, I mean I had Jeannie. So, if Alice made it past her, I knew there was a good chance she could actually use my help, which is why my shoulders reflexively slumped and I replied, "Shit, trust me. After 12 years, you'd be kind of over it too." Plus, it was already the end of a long night. But the girl paid her consultation fee, so I sucked it up and heard what Alice had to say. She told me what I just told you, and I discovered that once again, Jeannie's instincts had been right. Next thing I know, my roommate Sarah, the real one, is there, and she's screaming for me to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I couldn't see, and I still couldn't move anything, even my eyelids. Whatever it was out there. Would nymphs? I interjected, my mouth half full of pizza. Alice had popped by unannounced during what was normally my dinner time, so you can stop judging me. I hadn't meant to interrupt her. It was more of a reflex. But Alice seemed grateful, borderline delighted, by my faux pas. She immediately asked me to repeat myself, and by the time I finished swallowing, she had already pulled out her phone and her thumb was hovering over the screen. Would nymphs? Sure sounds like him anyway. WODN, Alice said in a questioning tone.
YMPH.
I thought Tulane was a good school. Alice didn't reply to my attempt at witty banter. I'm pretty sure she didn't hear anything after H. She immediately became engrossed in scanning through search results, so I gave her another moment and then finally forced a cough. Alice locked her screen and set her phone in her lap, looking embarrassed.
Sorry.
Remembering the consultation fee, I smiled and gave her a dismissive wave as I replied, "Not a problem. Go on. Finish your story." Right so. Alice wore the telltale expression of someone drawing a complete blank. So I said, "You couldn't see and you couldn't move, but you could hear Sally?" I could hear Sarah screaming my name, but not from my phone. She had made it home by then and was there in the kitchen with me, and she covered my eyes with her hand, and that finally snapped me out of it. We ran out of there and hid in my room until our other roommate Lana got home, and she got us high, and that was when Sarah said that she had meant to tell me when I moved in, but basically, if I ever saw her or Lonnie standing out in the woods behind the house, not to look at them because it won't be them. Wait, so, your roommates already knew about the nymphs? I asked with an incredulous tenor that had been impossible to suppress. I guess? I was too freaked out and high to ask any follow-up questions. Plus, you know how hard it is to find affordable housing in this city, and I mean, the whole thing felt like a dream. By the next day, I was convinced I had dreamed it, but then it happened again. I knew to look away this time, but it still scared the shit out of me, and of course I was home alone again. Only this time, when I tried calling Sarah and Lonnie, their phones kept going to voicemail. That was 3 days ago, and neither one has been home since. It's like they just vanished. Alice began to look genuinely unnerved as she recounted all of this to me, so I tried to distract her by asking, "And you said the house is uptown?" Alice swallowed and then nodded as she replied, "The Garden District. I know the neighborhood. Didn't know there were any patches of woods around there. Instead of individual backyards, the homes on our block form what they call a micropark. It's actually really nice. There's a jogging path and a rock climbing wall." "Uh-huh. So," I said and clapped my hands together in a finite gesture. "There's a real simple solution to your problem." Alice looked relieved as she replied, "Oh, thank God. Don't ever go back to that house." "What?" "I have to. I live there." I leaned forward and tried my best not to sound like a condescending dad as I said, "Listen to me very carefully, Alice. Your roommates are almost certainly dead. Unless you want to end up the same way, you will never step foot inside that house again. Live in your car if you have to. I promise it's a better alternative to whatever the Dryads have planned for you." Dryads? Another term for wood nymphs. And what are wood nymphs? A race of all-female fairies who reside exclusively in forests and reproduce using oak trees. Alice looked equal parts baffled and disgusted by my answer. Her tone was almost irate as she said, "How do they do that? Trust me, you don't want to know. And you definitely don't want to be living near any." Alice took several moments to process this, and then finally she asked, "Why do they look like us? Like my roommates and me?" I shook my head and thought about how best to phrase my reply. "They don't really. What you saw was like a psychic projection. They were trying to lure you outside. So they showed you people they thought you would trust." They thought I'd trust me? You're trying to apply human logic to something that has never been human. You don't try to reason with a wild animal. You just run. I could see some part of Alice still wanted to argue this point, but instead of pressing the issue, she simply muttered, "What about all my stuff? There are moving services you can hire to pack your things for you and deliver them wherever. You don't even need to be there when they do the packing. I can recommend a guy who won't rip you off." Alice seemed to remember something and suddenly sounded on the verge of panic as she said, "But?" I groaned in frustration and then took a breath to try and level out my tone as I replied, "What? My dog is still there." I really thought this was going to be an easy one too. I sighed and shook my head, even opened my mouth, fully prepared to protest, but all I managed to say was, "We go now, and we make it quick. I mean like 10 minutes max. And you're paying me for a full day. Deal." As soon as I saw the house where Alice was renting a room, I knew it was a trap, especially for what she told me she was paying in rent. Even the shittier houses in this neighborhood went for about $500,000, and this was by no means one of the shittier houses. And yet, I still let this next part happen anyway because, like Alice said, knowing and seeing are two very different things. I was feeling anxious even before we reached the front door and could hear her dog whimpering on the other side. Alice unlocked the door and quickly switched on a light before crouching to greet an elated border collie. "Ah, my poor buddy was stuck here all alone all night. I'm so sorry. I was getting someone to help us." "Yes, I was." Alice glanced back at me and said, "Joel, this is Harry Styles, the love of my life." "Harry, this is Joel." He AI'd. "Pleased to meet you," I said, greeting Harry with a wave as I followed Alice inside and began to survey the foyer. "Remember that this needs to be fast. Just the essentials. Dawn is in a couple hours, and we don't want to be anywhere near this place by then." "Why?" "Because that's when they'll come for you. Wood nymphs can only move around in the daylight." "Oh, so they're like reverse vampires?" "No, hemogoblins are reverse vampires." Hemogoblins? What's a hemogoblin? Sorry if reverse vampire isn't a clear enough description, but we really need to focus. Harry and I escorted Alice upstairs to her bedroom, where she quickly packed what she needed. When Alice was done, she gave the room one last cursory scan before turning and forcing a smile which only caused the tears that had been welling in her eyes to finally spill over as she said, "I'm ready." We all headed back downstairs and Alice started to round up Harry's leash and other necessities. As I followed her into the kitchen to grab his food, Alice suddenly halted and Harry began to growl. I followed the dog's gaze to a door at the back of the kitchen which appeared to lead out to the micropark. A pale guy in his 20s was standing there, at the sectioned window built into the door's upper half. "There's a guy at your back door," I said, stating the obvious. "That's my ex, Ryan," Alice replied, her tone a mix of shock and confusion. I noted Ryan's off-center posture and lifeless, unfocused gaze, and it suddenly hit me what had happened here. Alice had found this room for rent after a tumultuous breakup with Ryan. Things had ended on such bad terms that Alice had made a point of not telling Ryan where she was moving. She had probably blocked his number and all his socials too, so he had no way of contacting her. But Ryan, who apparently never met a hint he was capable of taking, had somehow managed to figure out that Alice was living here at Casa de la Ninfa. Ryan must have arrived earlier today to confront Alice, but he also wasn't the type to simply walk up to her front door and knock. No, Ryan was a real class act and intentionally showed up when he knew Alice wouldn't be home, so he could scope the place out first, peer in a few windows, and check for any signs of a new man in her life. Unfortunately for poor creepy Ryan, he didn't make it that far. As he was heading around to the back windows, Ryan probably spotted Alice standing at the edge of the small patch of trees just behind the house. She was wearing only a short silk robe, and she was waving Ryan over, and she was smiling at him. Ryan tried to recall the last time he had elicited a genuine smile from Alice, but the nymphs descended on him long before he could remember the answer. The thing now using Ryan's slack, lifeless face to peer in at us through the back door was what we in the biz called a skinwalker, which is a catch-all term for any external entity inhabiting a reanimated corpse. Naturally, solutions vary as to how you eliminate them, but in this instance, I had come prepared. "I'm gonna let him in," I said, as I moved to stand beside the back door. "The fuck you are." I held up a hand and pleaded to Alice with my eyes. "Just trust me. I promise I won't let him touch you. But he is going to chase you." "There's something wrong with him," Alice replied, ignoring me. She had finally noticed Ryan's gone appearance, judging from her panicked tone. "He's dead?" I said, and Alice shot me a desperate look that I was unfortunately very familiar with, but we didn't have time for her to lose it right now. "I know. It's a lot. Whole range of emotions, I'm sure. But you really need to pay attention. When I open this door, you need to run away. He is going to chase you, but I promise I won't let him catch you." "Okay." The skinwalker had pushed Ryan's face right up to the glass now, and his vacant eyes appeared to be slowly scanning the kitchen. A horrified Alice was just standing there watching him. So again I asked, "Okay?" "Okay," Alice finally replied with a quick nod of her head, her eyes still fixed on her dead ex. "Okay," I repeated and then placed my hand on the doorknob. "Run." Alice turned to do as instructed, just as I yanked open the back door, and the skinwalker entered the kitchen with an unnatural burst of speed. Fast enough that he lumbered right past me and I was able to jab the stun baton directly into the small of his back, hitting the base of his spine and sending 150,000 volts coursing through Ryan's nervous system, causing most of his major muscle groups to seize up. To an actual person, this would have been an extremely painful experience, but since the skinwalker couldn't feel shit, it just stood there twitching with its limbs awkwardly frozen in place. I retrieved the flare gun from my waistband and then gave Ryan's spine another prolonged shock to buy myself a few more seconds as I circled around to the front of him. By this point, I guess Alice's curiosity had won out over her fear because she poked her head back through the doorway just in time to watch me jam the barrel of the flare gun into her ex-boyfriend's open mouth. I squeezed the trigger and a sulfur-scented burst of red light turned Ryan's head into a human jack-o'-lantern. See, signal flares burn very hot, and wood nymphs are extremely flammable. It took only a matter of moments for the white-hot flare to bore a hole through the back of Ryan's throat and ignite the dryad currently coiled around his spine like it was made out of flash paper. I realized Alice was standing there just as Ryan's back began to emit smoke. Just enough time for me to shout, "Don't look!" But sadly not enough time for Alice to actually do so before something resembling a large flaming mandrake root tore its way out of Ryan's asshole and landed coiled in a writhing mass on the kitchen floor. "What did you do?" I started to turn back to comfort Alice when I realized it hadn't been her who shouted that, but rather her roommate Sarah. She had entered the kitchen behind Alice and was now standing there looking pissed. I opened my mouth to attempt to explain the horrific tableau she had just witnessed, though I'm still not sure how exactly I would have done that, when I felt a sudden stabbing pain in my left butt cheek. I reflexively spun back around to find Alice's other roommate Lana standing directly behind me and holding a hand behind her back. She smiled and waved at me with her visible hand as she said, "Hi."
I'm Lana.
"Did you just stab me in the BU dash?" My question was abruptly cut off as a section of the kitchen floor suddenly leapt up to smack me across the face. When I woke up a little over an hour later to find myself still staring at this same section of tiled floor, I realized I had simply fallen over. I assumed Lana had injected me with something to knock me out, and apparently, she had done the same to Alice. I could see her sprawled out beside me on the kitchen floor and quietly snoring. I couldn't see Sarah or Lana at first, but judging from the sound of their voices, they were both standing facing the back door's window and in the midst of a heated discussion. I mean, so what? What's the difference if we let them use the prick she brought here to impregnate her? Because we haven't vetted the prick she brought here. Alice and her scorned ex go missing? Abduction resulting in murder-suicide. That makes sense. But we don't know who this guy is. We have no idea what kind of heat his disappearance will bring. Well, he fried our only other option, and we're gonna have to kill them both either way. I say we might as well give it a shot. Sarah suddenly gasped. There was a hollow thud as she tapped a finger against the back door's sectioned window and said, "Look, they're waking up." "Fuck you. I'm not looking at those things." "Don't be such a chicken. Just don't make direct eye contact." "How hard is that?" "Now, quick. Before they do the HHH. Clearly, neither of these girls had been expecting me to have an almost superhuman tolerance to barbiturates, byproduct of a lifetime battle with chronic night terrors, because they had left both the flare gun and my stun baton laying right there beside me. Also, Lana looked rather surprised when she turned to find me electrocuting her buddy and aiming my freshly reloaded flare gun at her face. For some quick context, these demented bitches were planning on feeding me to wood nymphs and then letting my reanimated corpse do unspeakable things to Alice, presumably so they could harvest the resulting newborn dryad's afterbirth, because fun fact, wood nymph placenta is a catalyst in a bunch of dark rituals. Sarah and Lana were likely witches who were using this stuff to keep themselves looking young. I did some digging afterward and found photos of them dated as far back as the 1950s, so they had been at this for a while and were also likely the ones who led Ryan to the house. For, at least, the past 70-something years, they had been preying on vulnerable young women fleeing abusive relationships and desperate to find affordable housing. Also, they could use them to farm fairy afterbirth. So, please don't feel too bad when I then tell you I fired that flare gun at Lana's face without even a moment of hesitation. The blindingly bright flare tore a charred gouge into the center of her cheek before bouncing off and becoming lodged in her hair. Lana let out an ear-splitting scream as she sprinted away in a blind panic, feeding the flames which had already begun to engulf her head. I returned my attention to Sarah and was pleasantly surprised to find her still standing frozen at the back door with her wide, unblinking eyes fixed on something just outside its sectioned window. The sun had risen while I was unconscious, and the wood nymphs, sensing blood in the water, had begun to emerge from the micropark one by one until almost a dozen vaguely female-shaped blurs were now crowding around the back door. At least, that's how they appeared to me, because I knew better than to tempt fate by looking directly at them. Unfortunately for Sarah, when being electrocuted, one of the human body's many reflexive responses is the eyes open wide. It hadn't been an intended result. I wish I was that clever on my feet. But when I shocked Sarah with my baton, she suddenly found herself forced to make direct eye contact with one of the approaching nymphs and was now paralyzed by its gaze. I had already turned and sprinted over to Alice when I heard the back door open and the sound of Sarah being dragged outside. But even then, I didn't risk looking back. I just hoisted Alice's unconscious body over my shoulder fireman style and booked it out of the kitchen. I could still hear Lana screaming from somewhere on the first floor, and the fire engulfing her had started to spread. As I carried Alice into the now smoke-filled foyer to find several curtains on fire, I was suddenly joined by Harry Styles, who came trotting down the stairs with a very concerned look on his face. Thankfully, the path to the front door was still clear, and I was able to get all three of us out safely. The house burned down. As far as I know, no remains were found inside, but oddly enough, a completely unrelated fire destroyed most of the micropark later that night. Arson was suspected in the second fire because investigators found traces of accelerant all over the place. Luckily, the brilliant and undoubtedly well-hung individual who started that blaze took precautions to ensure it wouldn't spread to any of the surrounding homes. To be honest, this wasn't even one of my weirder cases, but I've been wanting to document my favorites for a while now and figured I should probably start with a simple, run-of-the-mill, occult placenta farm story to help ease you in before I tell you about some of the really crazy shit. Fifth story. My little ghoul. My name is Meg, and when I was 12 years old, I didn't really have friends. At one point then we lived in the countryside, but it was only for the summer until school started again. The house was really big and old, so one day I went around it to explore. That is where my story begins. While I was exploring that day, I found a bunch of interesting stuff, but also kept hearing weird cracking and hissing noises coming from the basement. It was locked, so I couldn't go down there to check. After searching for a bit, I found a bunch of old keys in a drawer in the study. One of them worked on the basement door, so I was able to get in there. The whole place was really stinky and dusty, with cobwebs everywhere. The stairs and walls were all wooden, so walking down made the steps creak. It was really dark, with no light coming from the small painted black windows, and I could still hear hissing and cracking coming from one corner of the room. The air was really heavy, and it smelled like rot and dirt. Then I saw something moving in the shadows. At first I thought it was a kitty cat, but no kitty is that big. It was definitely some sort of creature. It was almost as tall as me, and looked like a little boy, but he was somehow different. He had an unusual face, with gray skin and big stretched yellow eyes. His hands had really long nails that looked more like claws, and his teeth were small, sharp, and there were a lot of them. He was wearing old and torn, dirty clothes. "Are you afraid?" the boy asked me with that weird hissing in his voice I kept hearing. "Not really." I just stared at him. I was more curious than frightened. "What are you doing in our basement?" "I got stuck here and couldn't find a way out. Hunger has made me weak." He was staring at me back, but it wasn't with curiosity. "If you are hungry, I can make you a sandwich. Just come up and then we can tell my mom and dad, and they can call your par."
No.
The boy's eyes lit bright as he screamed at me. I stepped back a bit startled, not because of him screaming, but because for a split second he got from his end of the basement to being right in front of me, just an inch away from my face. "No," telling. The boy slowly hissed through his sharp teeth. He was out of breath. Okay, okay, I won't tell. He stepped away from me without breaking eye contact. He had a new expression on his face. He looked me up and down and seemed confused. Don't I scare you? Why aren't you running away screaming? I don't know, but you don't seem scary. You do look a bit weird for a little boy, though. I am not a little boy. He went back to his corner and sat down. I'm a ghoul. A what? A different type of being. He was piercing me with his yellow eyes. Then he paused and said, Do you have any food? I've been here so long. My strength is limited now. He was breathing heavily. Why, yes, sure. I can make you a sandwich, and I think there's some more pie in the fridge that my mama made yesterday. I was getting more curious and sat down on the floor in front of him. I don't eat that kind of food. The boy shook his head angrily. Then what do you like? He buried his head in his crossed arms over his knees and began rocking back and forth without saying anything. I looked around the basement and noticed the rotting smell was coming from quite a few long dead pigeons scattered around. It looked like there was a crack somewhere in the basement, considering they somehow got in, but I couldn't understand why the little boy couldn't get out. Why have you stayed here? I know the door was locked, but I am sure there should be another way out. Or you could have screamed for help. What happened to you? The boy lifted his head a little so that he could look me in the eyes. He seemed cautious and yet interested in me. He uncrossed his arms and moved closer. He stared at my face for a few seconds and then told me his story, how he and his family were on the run, how he got separated from them by force, how he hid in this house scared and alone, but the people chasing him found him, how he went in the basement to hide, but after that found out that he couldn't open the door anymore as it had gotten locked from the outside, how he tried to find a way out but couldn't. He had broken a window but couldn't fit through it, how a few pigeons had fallen in the basement through the crack, so he didn't at least starve to death. I was too small then to break down the door, and after some time became too weak to even scream. My family is probably dead and without food. I'll soon join them. At age 12 I had some concept of death, but I knew I had to help that little boy, or ghoul, or whatever he was. His story had made me so sad. I sprung from my position and said, No, you won't. Let's go upstairs and we'll find you something to eat. The boy seemed somehow disappointed. I can't handle light right now. From down here I never know if it is day or night out there, and I am too weak to be on the move for a long period of time. I stayed on my place thinking what to do. Well, I will find something for you. Until then you can stay here. I won't tell my parents if you don't want to. I laughed.
EOMI.
What is your name? You can call me Al, the boy said after a short pause.
Okay, Al.
I'll think of something and we'll come right back. I hopped on the stairs and out of the basement, closing and locking the door behind me. I was very excited. I had the feeling I am making a friend in the most unexpected way. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. I took out some leftover chicken, some peas, some carrots, a few apples, chocolate pudding, and some bread. I mean, if he didn't like sandwiches or pie. I took it down to him, and after a couple of days I found that he hadn't touched any of the food. It had started to spoil. At that point, he wouldn't talk to me anymore, so I kept trying to find ways to make him happy so that he would talk to me. One day I was out in the yard and I found a couple of dead pigeons in the bushes. I looked at them and remembered the dead birds in the basement. It sounded disgusting to me, but I was willing to try anything. So I got the rotting birds in a bag and I took them to Al. When I got to the basement, I heard his voice for the first time in a few days. You found food? His voice was weak and trembling. I said I wasn't sure and put the bag in front of him. To my surprise, he opened it up and started eating the rotting flesh off the pigeon's bones. It was both disgusting and fascinating. Over the next few days, I would find dead animals for Al to eat. My mom once almost caught me carrying a dead possum, so I had to be more careful after that. Al and I became really close. I would tell him about myself. He would tell me about his life. We would have the most amazing conversations and became the best of friends. With having found a food source he likes, Al began having more strength and energy. And then he started telling me some very strange things. So you eat only dead animals? I once asked him. Not really. He looked at me tentatively and slurped a piece of rotting meat. Imagine it this way. A ghoul, me, eating only rotting animals, is like a human. You, eating only potatoes and veggies. You never fully enjoy food that way. He winked at me. I thought about what he said but never quite fully understood what he meant at the time. I was very happy of finally having a friend, and Al was really good at being one. He even said he'd stay with me forever, so he never left the basement. But I had forgotten about one little detail. We would have to go back to the city at the end of the summer. At about mid-August, one morning, my mom told me to start packing my room little by little. Then it hit me that I would need to leave this house, this basement and Al. And I didn't want to. And I couldn't tell my parents why. How could they believe me and let me be? I started arguing with her, and this lasted for a few days. My father wasn't happy with me, too, but I didn't care. I didn't want to leave Al. I could never leave Al. I tried speaking to them a few times, but they wouldn't listen. So then I screamed and yelled and cursed and cried and threw things. I am sure my parents were shocked to what was happening, but it didn't matter if it meant I would get to be with my Al. My parents tried talking to me, yelling at me, reasoning with me, punishing me, begging me. I ignored all of that and still lost that battle. My parents then started to pack my things themselves and completely ignored my tantrums. So I ran to Al crying. "We need to find a way to take you with me," I said in tears. That was the only option I could think of. My parents are awful. I hate them. They never listen to me. Al was watching me with his warm yellow eyes. I could swear I saw sympathy in them. You know that can't happen. Your folks will definitely notice someone else walking and talking along with them. Then he became quiet and after a few minutes asked, "What if I tell you you could stay here forever with me?" Yes, yes. How do we do that? I was crying my eyes out. For a second there I thought I saw Al smirk a bit. But I am sure I was seeing things because I would never find my crying amusing. Hold on. That can only work if I can have you all to myself. No one else's. Only mine. He held my hands while watching me intently. I found the spark in his eyes hypnotizing. What do you mean? I was getting confused to where Al was headed with this idea. You want to stay with me. I want to stay with you, he started explaining. But you are a part of a family. Your parents have no idea that I exist and don't have a clue why you want to stay so badly here. You've been trying to explain it to them in multiple ways, but they still don't listen, do they? No. I looked down sobbing. Al laid back and put his hands behind his head. I was sure the little smirk was back on his face. So if they don't listen, and you can't reason with them, and you've tried everything, then they will never understand. So the only way is, he shrugged and looked around the room while talking, is for them not to be around. He pierced me with his wild eyes and went silent. I stopped sobbing and blankly stared at the wall behind Al. For them not to be around. That sentence kept ringing in my head for a few minutes before I stuttered. Why you mean T2 make them leave without me for the city? Oh, no. You know they will never go for it. Al moved a little closer. I mean, make them not be around anymore. He stayed gazed at me for a little while. Then he just indifferently waved his hands around. You can think about what I said, Meg. I went up to my room and tried to get some sleep. But every time I tried closing my eyes, they would open back up again. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned around and saw the boxes my parents had started to pack. At the sight of them, I began feeling desperate, then mad and miserable at the same time, making me move, making me leave my first, only and best friend, making me obey whatever they say, making me do what I don't want to do. Parents know best. Bullshit. Al had been understanding. They hadn't been. They never listened to me. It had been 2 hellish weeks of my life that I wanted over. I got up and went downstairs. After about half an hour, I came back, went to bed, and slept like a baby the rest of the night. The next day, I went downstairs to the basement and brought another dead animal treat for Al and some new clothes. He was sitting in his usual corner. I threw him the carcass and everything else, and with a steady voice said, "I'll come get you tonight, when it's dark out." Al's face curved into a cunning grin. "I will be waiting." That night I took the keys to the basement, unlocked the door, and called for Al. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, that sly smile still on his face, his eyes glowing unusually hungry. He slowly started walking up the stairs towards me, not moving his eyes from mine, not blinking. He went through the door, and for the first time I saw him, all of him, standing next to me. His wonderful black messy hair, his beautiful golden eyes, big and wide below thick dark eyebrows, his straight thin, slightly snubbed nose, his wide thin mouth hiding all those pointy little teeth, the little dimple on the right side of his slightly pointy chin, those perfect and wide cheekbones, his tall figure that surpassed my height a bit, with long grayish limbs. When he stepped next to me, he stretched, pulling his head back and his arms sideways. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "I smell," he said, slowly opening them up. "You've made a choice." He turned to look at me and smiled. "I made them not be around anymore," I stated in a simple manner. Then I looked to the right, where the bloody knife was still on the kitchen table, exactly where I had left it the night before. "Tough call." Al chuckled and raised an eyebrow. "No, couldn't sleep." Then he embraced me with his long arms, held me tight, and kissed my forehead. "I'll clean up for you," he said, and slowly started walking towards the staircase. After a couple of minutes, I followed him. I got up to the second floor. I went to my parents' bedroom. I peeked inside and saw Al leaning over the dead, rotting bodies of my parents, laying in their own blood and excrements, the same bodies that 24 hours ago I stabbed in their sleep. Al was slowly feasting on the rotting flesh, letting out joyful sounds from time to time. That sight made me so happy. I guess he's not on a diet anymore. My Al, finally free. Us, together, finally free. Now we could be together forever, just like Al promised. I am a little older now, 16 to be exact. Al and I are still inseparable. We live in that same big old house where we found each other. No one ever came looking for me, or my parents. I guess my father never bothered to tell anyone where we went off to that summer. Once only, a couple of hunters found Al's traces, but we invited them to dinner, so we are fine. Al hasn't had to diet anymore, so he is pretty happy. I help him with the preparation of his food, and then he joyfully gorges on it. I don't think I have ever known such true happiness before. Unfortunately, the news have recently reported police investigations in our region on the accounts of missing people. I am not sure where that would lead us and what would happen, so just in case, I have put my short memoir together, so that you know my story. To anyone out there reading this, just know me and Al are happy. He is my family, my best friend, my everything. He is my little ghoul. And sometimes I wonder what would our babies be like.